It's Cabras. I was a CIA operations officer stationed at the Greenbrier Hotel in West Virginia from 1983 to 1985.
Before we get started, if you're into real stories from intelligence operations, the classified facilities, the cover stories that lasted decades, the things the government keeps buried, literally and figuratively, hit that subscribe button right now. Drop a like if you want more CIA field stories. And seriously, comment where you're watching from and what time is it there. I want to know who's listening to this. Now, what I'm about to tell you happened at the Greenbrier Hotel in West Virginia in 1984, and it's the reason that bunker was never actually used for its stated purpose. Let's get into it. My name is James Mitchell, and from 1983 to 1985, I was a CIA operations officer assigned to what was officially called the Greenbrier Emergency Relocation Facility. Most people who know about it think it was a secret bunker built under a luxury resort to house Congress during nuclear war. That's the cover story, and it worked perfectly for 30 years. The truth is more complicated. The Greenbrier Hotel in White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia, is a massive resort. 11,000 acres, 710 rooms, built in 1778. Beautiful place. Hosts presidents and foreign dignitaries. In 1958, the government cut a deal with the hotel. We'll build a massive addition to your West Virginia wing. What we didn't tell the public was that underneath that addition, we'd carve out a 112,000 square foot bunker designed to house all 535 members of Congress, plus 600 support staff during a nuclear attack. That's what the public eventually learned when the bunker was declassified in 1992. That's the version that's on Wikipedia, that you can tour today for $35. But that was never the real purpose of the bunker. I was recruited to the CIA in 1979, straight out of Georgetown. Spent my first 4 years doing standard analytical work at Langley, Soviet missile capabilities, East German military infrastructure, and the usual Cold War stuff. Good at my job, kept my head down, earned my security clearances. In August 1983, I was called into my supervisor's office. Director William Frost, a man who'd been with the agency since its founding in 1947. He looked at me with the kind of tired eyes that come from carrying too many secrets for too long. "Mitchell, how familiar are you with the Greenbrier facility?" he asked. "The congressional bunker?" Basic knowledge. Built in the late 50s, maintained undercover as hotel staff, designed for continuity of government in case of nuclear war. "That's the cover story," Frost said. "And you're going to help maintain it. But your real assignment is something else entirely, something that requires a specific kind of discretion." He slid a folder across his desk. Classified, top secret, eyes only. I opened it. Inside were geological surveys, mining reports, and classified documents from 1958, the year the bunker was built. The Greenbrier sits on top of one of the deepest coal mining networks in Appalachia, Frost said. Mines that go down over 2,000 feet. In 1958, when we were excavating for the bunker, we broke through into one of those old mine shafts, and we found something down there. Something that had been sealed away, probably for decades, maybe longer. "What kind of something?" I asked. Frost's expression was grim. "The kind that requires a CIA officer to be stationed on site permanently. The kind that requires a containment protocol. The kind that, if it ever got out, would make nuclear war look manageable." I arrived at the Greenbrier in September 1983. The hotel staff knew me as James Mitchell, Government Services Administration Inspector responsible for maintaining the bunker facility. I had a small office in the West Virginia wing, access to all restricted areas, and a cover identity that was boring enough that nobody asked questions. The bunker itself was exactly as advertised in the official story. Massive underground facility carved into the hillside, accessible through a hidden entrance disguised as a television equipment room. Inside, dormitories for 1,100 people. Decontamination showers, hospital, cafeteria, meeting rooms. Everything Congress would need to survive nuclear war and maintain government operations. Except the deepest level wasn't on the public blueprints. Level 4 didn't officially exist. My second day there, Frost met me at the bunker entrance at 2 a.m. when the hotel was quiet and the maintenance crews had finished their shift. We took the main elevator down to level 3, the lowest level shown on official documents. Then he produced a key and opened a panel I hadn't noticed, revealing another elevator. "This is your real assignment," he said. We descended another 200 feet. The elevator opened into a corridor that was different from the bunker above. No painted concrete walls, no institutional lighting. This was rough-cut rock, minimal lighting, and the air was cold and damp. Mine shaft construction, not government bunker. We broke through into the mine system here," Frost explained, leading me down the corridor. August 12, 1958. Construction crew was excavating for what would become the main bunker when they hit one of the old coal tunnels. Should have been abandoned, should have been empty. But it wasn't, I said. No, there was something down here. The miners had sealed one of the deeper shafts with concrete and steel back in the 1930s. Our construction broke that seal, and what came out? He stopped in front of a massive steel door, the kind you see in bank vaults or missile silos. 3 feet thick, electronic locks, biometric scanners. This was 1984. This kind of security was cutting edge. "What came out killed 6 people," Frost said quietly. "Construction workers, miners who were consulting on the excavation. Killed them in ways that, well, you'll read the classified reports. After we contained it, after we realized what we were dealing with, the entire bunker project changed purpose. Yes, we'd still use it for Congress in case of nuclear war, but the real reason we built it, the real reason we've maintained it for 25 years, is to keep this door locked." "What's behind it?" I asked. Frost typed a code into the electronic lock. The door unsealed with a hiss of pressurized air. Beyond it was another corridor, this one with more sophisticated lighting, monitoring equipment, and what looked like scientific instruments. "A research station," he said. "Officially, it doesn't exist. The scientists working here are contractors with security clearances higher than most senators. Their official records say they work for the Department of Energy. They're actually studying what we found in the mines, trying to understand it, trying to make sure it never gets out." We walked down the corridor. I could hear machinery humming, air filtration systems working, and underneath that something else, a sound that was almost subsonic, a vibration more than a noise. "It's contained," Frost said. "Has been for 26 years. Your job is to make sure it stays that way. Maintain security protocols, coordinate with the science team, monitor the containment systems, and if there's ever a breach." He handed me a red phone, the kind with no dial, no numbers. Direct line. "You call this number, and you evacuate everyone within a 5-mile radius." The science team consisted of 4 people, all of them civilians with security clearances that took years to obtain. They worked rotating shifts, 2 on, 2 off, 24-hour coverage. Dr. Alice Cooper was the team lead. 43 years old, biochemist, had been studying the entity since 1971. She'd given up a promising career at MIT to spend 12 years underground in West Virginia, studying something she couldn't publish, couldn't discuss, couldn't even acknowledge existed. "You're the new handler," she said when Frost introduced us. Not a question. She'd been through 3 CIA officers before me. "That's right." "What exactly am I handling?" I asked. She led me deeper into the research station, past laboratories full of equipment I didn't recognize, past monitoring stations showing readouts I couldn't interpret, to a final door, this one even more heavily reinforced than the first. In 1932, miners working the Sewell seam broke through into a void space about 2,000 feet down, she explained. Natural cavern, maybe 400 feet in diameter. They should have reported it to the mining company, should have had it properly surveyed. But this was the Depression. Jobs were scarce, and there were rumors of mineral deposits down there that could make a crew rich if they kept quiet about it. "So they went exploring," I said. "They went down into the cavern, and they found something. Something that had been sealed in that cavern, probably for thousands of years. Maybe longer." She pulled up a file on her computer, black and white photographs from 1932. Miners with oil lamps standing in a massive underground space. And in the center of that space, barely visible in the primitive lighting, was something. It looked organic, like a massive growth of fungus or coral, but the wrong color, deep black with veins of something that might have been luminescent. It had structure, geometry, patterns that suggested intelligence or purpose. But it was clearly alive. "They took samples," Cooper continued, "brought pieces back to the surface. That's when people started dying. Not immediately. Took about a week. But everyone who'd been in that cavern, everyone who'd touched the growth, they all died within 10 days, and they died badly." She showed me more photos. Autopsy reports from 1932, censored heavily but still clear enough. The victims' bodies had transformed, tissues converting into something else, something that matched the black growth from the cavern, like they were being assimilated. The survivors sealed the mine shaft with concrete and steel. Thought that would be the end of it. And it was, for 26 years. Until we broke through while building the bunker. "And released it," I said. "Partially. The seal was breached, and the entity began spreading through the mine system. We lost 6 people before we could contain it again. But this time, we didn't just seal it away. We built a research station, started studying it, trying to understand what it is and where it came from." "And?" I asked. "What is it?" Cooper's expression was troubled. "That's the problem. After 12 years of study, we still don't know. It's biological, but its biochemistry doesn't match anything on Earth. It's intelligent, responds to stimuli, appears to have memory, possibly even something like thought. And it's aggressive. Anything organic that gets close enough gets assimilated. Transformed, made part of it. How fast does it grow? Slowly, thank God. Under containment, it grows maybe an inch per year. But if it were released, if it had access to organic matter, soil, plants, animals, people, the growth rate would be exponential. We estimate it could cover West Virginia in 6 months, the entire eastern seaboard in 2 years. I stared at her. The entire eastern seaboard. "It's a colonizing organism," she said. "We think it might have arrived on Earth thousands of years ago. Maybe in a meteor. Got sealed in that cavern by geological processes, stayed dormant until the miners found it. And if we hadn't contained it in 1958, if we hadn't built this facility to keep it sealed, by now, it might have consumed half the planet." My job was simple in theory. Maintain security, coordinate with the science team, make sure nobody unauthorized got anywhere near level 4. In practice, it meant living a double life. During the day, I was a boring GSA inspector checking fire extinguishers and testing emergency lights in the bunker. At night, I was monitoring a containment facility keeping a potentially world-ending organism sealed underground. The hotel staff never suspected. Why would they? The Greenbrier was full of government officials, lobbyists, contractors. One more bureaucrat with clearance to the bunker wasn't remarkable. But there were complications. The Greenbrier sat on top of an active coal mining network. Most of the mines were abandoned, sealed off decades ago, but some were still operational, and they occasionally intersected with the old shafts, which meant we had to monitor the entire underground system, make sure no mining operation accidentally broke through into areas contaminated by the entity. That required cooperation with the coal companies, which meant more cover stories, more lies, more people who had to be kept in the dark about what we were really protecting. In January 1984, a small mining operation called Blackwood Coal started exploratory drilling about 3 miles from the Greenbrier. They were looking for new seams, testing core samples, standard prospecting. Their drill went down 1,800 feet, about 200 feet above where the entity was contained. I got an alert from the monitoring system. Seismic activity, vibration patterns suggesting nearby drilling. I called the mining company, using my GSA cover identity, told them they were too close to a government facility and needed to cease operations immediately. They refused, said they had permits, had done their environmental impact studies, had every right to drill there. I made calls, pulled in favors, got federal marshals to shut down the operation. The mining company sued, claimed government overreach. The case got tied up in court for months. And then, in April 1984, one of the miners from that operation showed up at the Greenbrier. His name was Tom Brenner, 53 years old. Worked for Blackwood Coal for 20 years. He found me in my office, said he needed to talk. Said he'd heard I was the government official who'd shut down their drilling operation. I need to know why, he said. Not the official reason, the real reason. Because I've been mining these mountains for 30 years and I know when the government's hiding something. Mr. Brenner, I can't discuss. There's something down there, he interrupted. Isn't there? Something the government doesn't want found. I've heard stories from old-timers about mines that got sealed in the 30s because of accidents, strange accidents, people dying from something that wasn't gas or cave-ins. I kept my expression neutral. I don't know what you're referring to. My grandfather worked the Sewell seam in 1932, Brenner said. He was one of the miners who went down into that cavern. He survived because he didn't touch anything down there. But he saw what it did to the others. Saw them change. Saw them die. He told me about it when I was young, made me promise never to dig near that area. And then your government comes along and builds a bunker right on top of it. The survivors sealed the mine shaft with concrete and steel. Thought that would be the end of it. And it was, for 26 years. Until we broke through while building the bunker. And released it, I said. Partially. The seal was breached, and the entity began spreading through the mine system. We lost 6 people before we could contain it again. But this time, we didn't just seal it away. We built a research station, started studying it, trying to understand what it is and where it came from. And, I asked, what is it? Cooper's expression was troubled. That's the problem. After 12 years of study, we still don't know. It's biological, but its biochemistry doesn't match anything on Earth. It's intelligent, responds to stimuli, appears to have memory, possibly even something like thought. And it's aggressive. Anything organic that gets close enough gets assimilated. Transformed, made part of it. How fast does it grow? Slowly, thank God. Under containment, it grows maybe an inch per year. But if it were released, if it had access to organic matter, soil, plants, animals, people, the growth rate would be exponential. We estimate it could cover West Virginia in 6 months, the entire eastern seaboard in 2 years. I stared at her. The entire eastern seaboard. It's a colonizing organism, she said. We think it might have arrived on Earth thousands of years ago. Maybe in a meteor. Got sealed in that cavern by geological processes, stayed dormant until the miners found it. And if we hadn't contained it in 1958, if we hadn't built this facility to keep it sealed, by now, it might have consumed half the planet. My job was simple in theory. Maintain security, coordinate with the science team, make sure nobody unauthorized got anywhere near Level 4. In practice, it meant living a double life. During the day, I was a boring GSA inspector checking fire extinguishers and testing emergency lights in the bunker. At night, I was monitoring a containment facility keeping a potentially world-ending organism sealed underground. The hotel staff never suspected. Why would they? The Greenbrier was full of government officials, lobbyists, contractors. One more bureaucrat with clearance to the bunker wasn't remarkable. But there were complications. The Greenbrier sat on top of an active coal mining network. Most of the mines were abandoned, sealed off decades ago. But some were still operational, and they occasionally intersected with the old shafts. Which meant we had to monitor the entire underground system, make sure no mining operation accidentally broke through into areas contaminated by the entity. That required cooperation with the coal companies, which meant more cover stories, more lies, more people who had to be kept in the dark about what we were really protecting. In January 1984, a small mining operation called Blackwood Coal started exploratory drilling about 3 miles from the Greenbrier. They were looking for new seams, testing core samples, standard prospecting. Their drill went down 1,800 feet, about 200 feet above where the entity was contained. I got an alert from the monitoring system. Seismic activity, vibration patterns suggesting nearby drilling. I called the mining company, using my GSA cover identity, told them they were too close to a government facility and needed to cease operations immediately. They refused, said they had permits, had done their environmental impact studies, had every right to drill there. I made calls, pulled in favors, got federal marshals to shut down the operation. The mining company sued, claimed government overreach. The case got tied up in court for months. And then, in April 1984, one of the miners from that operation showed up at the Greenbrier. His name was Tom Brenner, 53 years old. Worked for Blackwood Coal for 20 years. He found me in my office, said he needed to talk. Said he'd heard I was the government official who'd shut down their drilling operation. I need to know why, he said. Not the official reason, the real reason. Because I've been mining these mountains for 30 years and I know when the government's hiding something. Mr. Brenner, I can't discuss. There's something down there, he interrupted. Isn't there? Something the government doesn't want found. I've heard stories from old-timers about mines that got sealed in the 30s because of accidents, strange accidents, people dying from something that wasn't gas or cave-ins. I kept my expression neutral. I don't know what you're referring to. My grandfather worked the Sewell seam in 1932, Brenner said. He was one of the miners who went down into that cavern. He survived because he didn't touch anything down there. But he saw what it did to the others. Saw them change. Saw them die. He told me about it when I was young, made me promise never to dig near that area. And then your government comes along and builds a bunker right on top of it. I stared at the black tendrils growing through the crack in the concrete seal. They were moving. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, but definitely moving, growing, exploring. What is that? Tom Brenner whispered. We need to leave, I said, right now. Mitchell, what the hell is... Now. We backed away from the seal, keeping our flashlight beams on those tendrils. They didn't react to light, didn't pull back or advance faster, just kept growing at their steady, inevitable pace. We made it back to the surface at 2:30 a.m. I called the red phone the moment I had signal. Director Frost answered on the first ring. Status? Breach, I said. Fifth seal in the Sewell system. The entity is growing through a crack in the concrete. It's reached the mine shaft. Silence on the line. Then, how large is the breach? 2-inch crack, tendrils visible, actively growing. Biosensor confirms it's the entity. You're certain? Yes, sir. Stay where you are. Emergency response team is being deployed. ETA 3 hours. He hung up. I looked at Tom Brenner, who was sitting on a rock, breathing hard, staring at his hands. That was it, wasn't it? He said. That's what killed my grandfather's friends. That's what the government's been hiding under that hotel. Yes, I said. There was no point lying anymore. What is it? Something that should have stayed buried. And if we can't contain it again, if it gets into the main mine system... I didn't finish. Didn't need to. Brenner understood. He'd spent 30 years in these mountains. He knew how vast the mine network was, how many abandoned shafts and caverns connected underground. If the entity spread through that system, there'd be no stopping it. What do you need from me? He asked. Maps. Every shaft, every connection, every way the entity could spread. And I need to know where we can seal it off if the containment fails. The emergency response team arrived at 6 a.m. 12 people, scientists, engineers, hazmat specialists. All of them with top-secret clearances, all of them briefed on what they were dealing with. Dr. Cooper led them into the mine. They wore full containment suits, carried equipment to assess the breach and reinforce the seal. I stayed at the surface with Director Frost, who'd flown in from Langley on a military helicopter. How did this happen? He demanded. That seal was supposed to last indefinitely. It's been 53 years, I said. Concrete degrades, water seeps in, and the entity, I think it's been actively working to break through. Dr. Cooper said it was developing new structures, growth patterns oriented toward the old mines. This wasn't random deterioration. It was intentional. Intentional, Frost repeated. You're saying the entity is intelligent enough to identify weak points in its containment and actively work to breach them. That's exactly what I'm saying. Frost's expression was grim. Then we have a bigger problem than I thought. If it can breach one seal, it can breach others. And we have dozens of old seals in these mountains. The response team spent 6 hours examining the breach. When Dr. Cooper finally emerged from the mine, her expression told me everything I needed to know before she said a word. It's worse than we thought, she said. The entity has spread approximately 20 feet into the mine shaft. The growth is faster here than in containment, possibly because of different environmental conditions. Higher humidity, more organic matter in the soil. We can seal this breach, but what? Frost asked. The entity is producing spores. We found them throughout the contaminated section. Microscopic, airborne. If they've reached the ventilation system, if they've spread to other parts of the mine network, we need to check every sealed shaft, I said. Every connection to the main mine system. If spores have spread, there could be growth starting in multiple locations. That would take weeks, Cooper said. And we'd need access to private mining operations, sealed facilities, restricted areas. We'd have to coordinate with multiple agencies, multiple companies. The exposure risk is necessary, Frost said. Because the alternative is letting this thing spread unchecked through one of the largest underground systems in Appalachia. Mitchell, you have contacts with the local mining community. 1. Tom Brenner. He knows these mountains, knows the old mine systems, and he's already aware of what we're dealing with. Bring him in, Frost ordered. Official contractor status, temporary security clearance. We'll need guides who understand these mines. Over the next 3 weeks, we inspected 47 sealed mine shafts in a 50-mile radius of the Greenbrier. Tom Brenner and 3 other veteran miners led teams into places that hadn't been accessed in decades. Dangerous work. 2 men were hospitalized with respiratory problems from bad air. 1 team triggered a minor cave-in and had to be evacuated. But we found 5 more breaches. 5 more locations where the entity had broken through concrete seals and started growing into the mine system. All of them were older seals. All of them had cracks or deterioration, and all of them showed the same pattern: black tendrils extending into the shaft, spores in the air, growth oriented toward spreading through the underground network. "It's trying to reach something," Dr. Cooper said during an emergency briefing at the Greenbrier. "Look at the growth patterns. They're not random. The entity is spreading in specific directions, like it's navigating toward a destination." She pulled up a map showing all 6 breach locations and the direction of entity growth. When we plotted the vectors, they all converged on a single point approximately 40 miles southwest of the Greenbrier. "What's there?" Frost asked. I checked the geological surveys. Old coal mine, Consolidated Mining Company. Closed in 1934 after a major accident. 43 miners killed. "What kind of accident?" Cooper asked. I pulled up the historical records. Cave-in, entire section of the mine collapsed, sealed off a crew that was working the deep levels. They never recovered the bodies, just sealed the whole thing with concrete and abandoned the site. "Or," Cooper said slowly, "they found something down there. Something like what we found at the Greenbrier, and they sealed it away before it could spread." The implication hit me. "You think there's another instance of the entity? At the Consolidated Mine?" "I think that's where this one came from," Cooper said. "Or where it's trying to return to. Maybe the entity at the Greenbrier is just a fragment of something larger. Maybe it's been trying to reunite with the main colony for 50 years, and it's finally found a way." Frost stood up. "We need to inspect that mine. If there's a larger entity there, if these 2 growths connect, it would accelerate the spread exponentially," Cooper finished. 2 colonies communicating, sharing resources, coordinating growth. We'd lose containment completely. The Consolidated Mine was on private property, owned by a holding company that had forgotten it existed. Getting access required legal paperwork, liability waivers, and a cover story about environmental assessment. We went in on a gray February morning. Me, Dr. Cooper, Tom Brenner, and a 6-man hazmat team. The mine entrance had been sealed in 1934, but we cut through the concrete with industrial equipment. Beyond the seal was a shaft sloping down into darkness. The air that rushed out was cold and stale, smelling of minerals and decay. My biosensor immediately started registering hits. The entity was here. We descended slowly, following railroad tracks that hadn't been used in 50 years. The mine was larger than I expected, a major operation, probably employed hundreds of men before it closed. Side tunnels branched off in all directions, most of them blocked by cave-ins or deliberately collapsed. A mile in, we found the first signs: black growth on the walls. Not tendrils like we'd seen at the breaches. This was more extensive, covering entire sections of the tunnel, spreading across the ceiling, growing down into cracks in the floor. "How much is here?" I asked. Dr. Cooper took samples, checked readings on her equipment. "Based on the density and spread pattern, this colony is at least 10 times larger than the one at the Greenbrier, maybe more. It's been growing here since 1934, I said. 90 years. sealed away in darkness with nobody to stop it, Cooper agreed. If this breaks containment, if it reaches the surface. We kept going deeper. The growth became thicker, more extensive. In some sections, the black mass had completely filled side tunnels, blocking them with solid walls of organic material. And then we reached the area where the accident had happened. The tunnel opened into a massive chamber. Natural cavern, maybe 300 feet across. And filling that cavern, growing up from the floor and down from the ceiling, was the entity. It was enormous. The growth at the Greenbrier had been maybe 10 feet across. This was the size of a house. Multiple stories of black, branching structures, pulsing with bioluminescence, growing in patterns that hurt to look at for too long. And at the base of the growth, partially absorbed into the mass, were shapes that might once have been human. The miners who'd died in the 1934 accident. Their bodies assimilated, transformed, made part of the entity. Jesus Christ, one of the hazmat team whispered. Dr. Cooper was taking readings, documenting everything. It's mature, fully developed, and it's producing spores at a massive rate. The air in here is saturated with them. Is it contained? Frost asked over the radio. For now, Cooper said. The 1934 seal held, but the entity is definitely trying to break through. I'm seeing the same growth patterns we saw at the Greenbrier. Tendrils oriented toward sealed exits, structures that suggest it's testing the containment. And if the fragment from the Greenbrier reaches this location... Cooper was quiet for a moment, running calculations. If they connect, if they merge, exponential growth. They'll breach containment within weeks, maybe days. Then we seal the connecting tunnels, Frost said. Cut off any route between the two sites. That would require collapsing miles of mine shafts, I said. Controlled demolitions throughout the entire system. The risk of accidental breaches is less than the risk of these two colonies merging, Frost interrupted. We seal them separately, keep them isolated, and we maintain containment at both sites indefinitely. The demolition operation took 2 months to plan. We had to map every tunnel connection between the Greenbrier and the Consolidated Mine. Identify critical points where explosive charges would collapse the shafts without causing unintended cave-ins that might breach containment. It required cooperation from mining companies, local government, federal agencies. We told them it was environmental remediation, preventing groundwater contamination from abandoned mines. Another cover story, another lie to hide the truth. Tom Brenner helped coordinate with the mining community. Convinced skeptical operators that the government was actually trying to help. Made them believe the official story. But he knew the truth. And late one night in April, sitting in my Greenbrier office, he asked the question I'd been dreading. What happens if this doesn't work? He said. If the entity breaks out despite everything we're doing? We have contingency plans, I said. What kind of plans? I shouldn't have told him. It violated about a dozen security protocols. But Tom Brenner had been down in those mines with me, had seen what we were dealing with. He deserved to know. Scorched earth, I said. We have incendiary devices positioned at both sites. If containment fails catastrophically, if the entity spreads beyond our ability to control it, we burn everything. Collapse the mines, seal the caverns, incinerate every trace of organic material in a 50-mile radius. That would destroy half the county, Brenner said. Better than letting the entity spread across the eastern United States. And the people, the towns, would be evacuated first, under cover of a chemical spill or natural disaster. We'd get as many out as we could. Brenner stared at me. You've thought about this. Planned it. The government is ready to burn down half of West Virginia to stop this thing. If necessary, yes. He stood up, walked to the window overlooking the Greenbrier's manicured lawns. My family's lived in these mountains for 4 generations. My kids, my grandkids, they're all here. And you're telling me there's a doomsday switch that could end all of that. I'm telling you, we're doing everything possible to make sure that switch never gets flipped, I said. The demolitions, the containment reinforcement, the monitoring, it's all designed to prevent the worst-case scenario. But it's still there. Still a possibility. Yes. Brenner nodded slowly. Then I guess we'd better make damn sure your containment works. The demolitions began in June 1985. Controlled explosions throughout the mine system, collapsing strategic tunnels to create impenetrable barriers between the Greenbrier entity and the Consolidated Mine. We monitored both sites during the operation. Any sign of disturbance, any indication that the blasts were affecting the entities, we were prepared to abort. But the demolitions went smoothly. 17 tunnel sections collapsed exactly as planned. The mine system was fragmented, isolated sections sealed off from each other. By July, we'd created a buffer zone, 5 miles of collapsed shafts separating the 2 entity sites. It worked, Dr. Cooper reported. Both entities are isolated. Growth patterns have changed. They're no longer oriented toward each other. The connection's been severed. Director Frost, who'd remained on site throughout the operation, finally allowed himself to look relieved. Maintain containment at both locations. Enhanced monitoring, and Mitchell. Sir, good work. You stopped what could have been a catastrophic breach. The agency won't acknowledge it officially. This operation never happened. These reports don't exist. But you should know. You likely saved millions of lives. I stayed at the Greenbrier for another 6 months. Monitored the containment, coordinated with Dr. Cooper's team, maintained the cover story. The bunker continued operating as a congressional relocation facility. The hotel continued hosting dignitaries, and nobody suspected that the real purpose of the facility was keeping an alien organism sealed underground. In December 1985, I was reassigned to Langley. Someone else would take over the Greenbrier posting. The cycle would continue. CIA officers rotating through, maintaining the secret, ensuring the containment held. Tom Brenner continued working as an unofficial contractor for another 5 years. Monitoring mining operations, warning us about potential threats to the sealed areas. He never told his family what he'd helped contain. Carried that secret to his grave. Dr. Alice Cooper stayed at the research station until 1992, when the congressional bunker was declassified and opened for public tours. The research facility on Level 4 continued operating, just more carefully. The scientists had to work during hours when tours weren't running, had to maintain absolute silence about what they were studying. As far as I know, the containment still holds. Both entities remain sealed in their respective locations, growing slowly in the dark, testing the boundaries of their prisons. But sometimes I wonder, how many other sites are there? How many other mines? How many other caverns hold sealed entities that were discovered and buried by people who didn't understand what they'd found? How many other Greenbriers are out there, with CIA officers stationed at luxury hotels and classified facilities, maintaining cover stories to hide the truth about what's sealed underneath? I retired from the agency in 1997. Tried to forget about the Greenbrier, about the entity, about those black tendrils growing through cracks in 50-year-old concrete. But I still monitor West Virginia, still pay attention to mining accidents, cave-ins, unexplained incidents in the mountains, waiting for the news I hope never comes, the news that would mean containment failed, that the entity finally broke free. Because if that happens, if those seals finally give way after all these decades, there won't be an evacuation. Won't be time to save people. The entity spreads too fast, assimilates too efficiently. There'll just be the scorched-earth protocol, the incendiary devices, the burning, and West Virginia would become a sacrifice zone, destroyed to save the rest of the country from something that was sealed away in the 1930s and should have stayed buried forever. I'm 71 years old now, been retired from the CIA for 28 years. I live in Virginia, about 100 miles from the Greenbrier, close enough that I can drive there in 2 hours if I need to. And sometimes I do need to, because the containment is failing. Not catastrophically, not yet, but slowly, gradually, in ways that only someone who's been monitoring it for decades would notice. The signs are there if you know where to look. In 2003, there was a small earthquake, 4.2 magnitude, centered about 30 miles from the Greenbrier. Minor by seismic standards. Most people in the area barely felt it. But I knew what it meant. Stress on the underground structures, microfractures in the concrete seals, hairline cracks that could widen over time. I called the number I'd been given when I left the agency. A different handler answered. They rotate every few years, but the protocol was the same. Report any potential threat to containment. How concerned should we be? The handler asked. Monitor the sealed sites, I said. Check for any changes in growth patterns, any indication the entities are exploiting new weak points. Understood. We'll dispatch an assessment team. 3 weeks later, I got a call back. Minor increase in growth rate detected at the Greenbrier site. Seals are holding, but we're reinforcing the containment. Minor increase. That's how it starts. That's how these things fail. Not dramatic breaches, but gradual erosion. A crack here, a weak point there. And the entity is patient. It can wait decades for an opportunity. In 2009, I heard about a mining accident near the old Consolidated site. A small operation, exploratory drilling for natural gas. They went down 1,500 feet and hit something unexpected. Equipment failure, they said. Toxic gases, possibly. 2 workers hospitalized. I drove out there. Found the operation shut down, equipment abandoned, the whole site cordoned off with no explanation. I made calls, used old agency contacts, pulled in favors I'd been saving for 20 years. Finally got someone to tell me what really happened. The drilling operation had broken through into a sealed mine shaft. And the workers who went down to investigate came back changed. Confused, disoriented. Talking about black growth they'd seen in the shaft. About touching it because it looked inviting. Both workers died within a week. Tissue breakdown. Organ failure. The same pattern we'd seen in the 1950s. The site was sealed. Concrete poured into the drill hole. The workers' bodies were cremated, their medical records classified. Another cover-up, another secret buried. But it meant the entity at the Consolidated site was still active. Still capable of infecting people who got too close. And the accident proved that there were still ways to accidentally breach the containment, despite all our precautions. In 2015, there was another earthquake. Larger this time, 5.1 magnitude. And this time, the epicenter was directly beneath the Greenbrier. I felt it at my house. Dishes rattling, pictures swinging on walls. It lasted maybe 20 seconds, but in those 20 seconds I knew, with absolute certainty, that something had changed underground. I drove to the Greenbrier immediately. The hotel was fine, surface damage was minimal, but I wasn't concerned about the hotel. The current CIA handler met me in the parking lot. A woman in her 40s, professional and efficient, who introduced herself as Agent Torres. "Mr. Mitchell," she said, "I've read your file. You're not authorized to be here." "Level 4, I said. "I need access to Level 4. That's a classified facility. Without current clearance, Agent Torres, I spent 2 years stationed at this facility. I know what's sealed down there, and I know what an earthquake of that magnitude could do to 50-year-old containment systems. I need to see the damage. She studied me for a moment. Then, come with me. We went down to level 4. The research station was more sophisticated than I remembered. Better equipment, better monitoring, larger science team. But the fundamental setup was the same. Sealed door, containment protocols, the entity on the other side. Show me the damage assessment, I said. Dr. Alan Park, the current team lead, 52 years old, had been studying the entity since 2008, pulled up the data. 3 major structural cracks, 1 in the primary containment wall, 2 in secondary barriers. The entity has already begun growing into the gaps. Growth rate? I asked. Accelerated. Normally, it grows an inch per year. In the past 72 hours, it's grown 4 inches. It knows, I said. It felt the earthquake. Knows there's new weak points to exploit. We're reinforcing the containment, Torres said. Additional concrete, steel bracing, enhanced monitoring. We can handle this. But I saw it in her eyes. The same doubt I'd felt 30 years ago. The knowledge that eventually, no matter how much we reinforced, no matter how carefully we monitored, the containment would fail, because the entity was trying to break free, had been trying for 90 years, and it only needed to succeed once. In 2018, I heard about Tom Brenner's death. Lung cancer, they said. Lifetime of breathing coal dust working in poorly ventilated mines. He was 87 years old. I attended his funeral. His grandson approached me afterward. "You're James Mitchell," he said. "My grandfather talked about you. Said you worked together on something important in the 80s. Some kind of government project." "We did," I said carefully. "He never told us what it was. Just said it was classified. Said he'd help to keep people safe." The grandson paused. Whatever it was, it weighed on him. Toward the end, when the cancer got bad, he'd wake up at night talking about black growth in the mines, about things that should stay buried. The doctors thought it was the morphine, the pain medication making him hallucinate. "It wasn't," I said. "I know," the grandson replied. "Because 3 months before he died, he gave me something. A sealed letter, addressed to you. Made me promise to find you if he passed, to give it to you in person." He handed me an envelope. I opened it later that night, in my house, with a glass of bourbon to steady my nerves. Inside was a handwritten letter. "Mitchell, if you're reading this, I'm dead. Good, I'm tired of carrying what we know. Tired of watching the mountains and wondering when it'll break free. But I need to tell you something before I go. Something I never told you because I was afraid you'd think I was crazy. In 1932, my grandfather didn't just see the entity in that cavern. He touched it. Just for a second, just his bare hand against the growth. The other miners were the ones who brought pieces back to the surface. But my grandfather touched it down there. He survived. Somehow, he didn't get infected. Didn't die like the others. But it changed him. He told me that after he touched it, he could sense it, feel it. Even after the mine was sealed, even decades later. He knew it was down there. Knew it was growing. Knew it was waiting. And when I went down into those mines with you in 1985, when I saw the breach, I understood what he meant. Because I touched it too. Through my glove, just for a second. And now I can sense it. Both sites, the Greenbrier and Consolidated. I can feel them growing, feel them reaching toward each other. Mitchell, the demolitions didn't work. Not completely. The entities are still connected. Not physically. You collapsed the tunnels just fine. But somehow they're linked, communicating, coordinating, and they're getting stronger. I felt it getting worse over the years, the connection strengthening. By the time you read this, they'll be closer to breaking free than they've ever been. And I don't think the containment will hold much longer. Do what you have to do. Pull the trigger on that scorched-earth protocol if you need to. My family will evacuate if you tell them to. I've left instructions. Sealed envelope with my grandson, only to be opened if you give him a specific code word. Consolidated. But most importantly, don't let them connect. If those two entities merge, if they breach containment and reach each other, it won't just be West Virginia at risk. It'll be everything east of the Mississippi. Maybe more. The entity isn't just trying to spread, it's trying to return. To whatever brought it here in the first place. And if it succeeds, do your job, Mitchell. End this. Tom Brenner. I sat in my living room for hours after reading that letter, staring at words written by a dead man who'd carried the same burden I carried. Tom Brenner could sense the entity, had been monitoring it through some kind of connection he didn't understand and couldn't explain. And he'd felt it getting stronger. If he was right, if the entities were still linked despite the demolished tunnels, I made calls, used every remaining contact I had. Finally, reached Agent Torres. I need current data on both sites, I said. Growth rates, patterns, biochemical signatures. Mr. Mitchell, that information is classified. Get it to me. Unofficial channels if you have to. Because if I'm right, if what I suspect is happening, we have months at most before we lose containment completely. 2 weeks later, a USB drive arrived in my mail. No return address. Just the data I'd requested. I spent 3 days analyzing it, comparing growth patterns from the Greenbrier entity and the Consolidated Mine entity, looking for correlations, synchronization, anything that would indicate communication between the two sites. And I found it. The growth patterns were synchronized. Not perfectly, but close enough. When one entity accelerated growth, the other did too. When one developed new structures, the other developed similar formations. They were adapting in parallel, evolving together. Tom Brenner was right. They were still connected. I'm writing this in November 2024. I'm 71 years old and I know more about the Greenbrier entity than anyone alive except the current research team. And I know it's almost free. Last month, there was another seismic event. 4.8 magnitude. More cracks, more weak points, more opportunities for the entity to exploit. The current containment projections give it 18 months, maybe 2 years. Then the seals fail catastrophically, and the entity breaks through into the main mine system. When that happens, when it spreads through those tunnels toward the Consolidated Mine, toward the other entity, they'll merge, 2 colonies becoming one. And once they're unified, once they're coordinating with full awareness of each other, the scorched-earth protocol will activate. Incendiary devices planted throughout the containment zones. Controlled burns designed to incinerate every trace of organic material in a 100-square-mile area. Hundreds of towns, thousands of people, all evacuated under cover of a chemical spill or natural disaster. And then West Virginia burns. That's the plan. That's what happens if containment fails. Unless there's another option. Unless someone can find a way to kill the entity before it breaches. Not contain it, not seal it away. Kill it permanently. Dr. Cooper, retired now, living in Maryland, has been working on that problem for 40 years. Last time I spoke with her 3 years ago, she said she was close, said she'd found a compound that could break down the entity's cellular structure. But it would take years to synthesize enough for a full treatment. Years we don't have. I don't know why I'm sharing this. Maybe because I'm old and tired and ready for someone else to carry this burden. Maybe because the truth should be told before it's too late. The Greenbrier Hotel still operates. Still hosts conferences and weddings and corporate events. The bunker is a tourist attraction now. You can take tours, see the dormitories and meeting rooms where Congress was supposed to shelter during nuclear war. But nobody tours Level 4. Nobody except the science team and the CIA officers assigned to maintain containment. If you've been to the Greenbrier, if you've stayed at that beautiful resort, you were sleeping 200 feet above something that could end civilization. And you never knew. Hundreds of thousands of people have visited that hotel since 1958. Walked those halls, enjoyed those amenities, completely unaware of what was sealed beneath their feet. That's how secrets work, how the government hides the truth. Build a cover story so perfect, so mundane, that nobody questions it. A congressional bunker makes sense. A nuclear war relocation facility is believable. And nobody asks what else might be down there. I've arranged for this document to be released if containment fails, if the entity breaks free and the scorched-earth protocol activates. Someone needs to know why West Virginia burned, why hundreds of thousands of people were evacuated, why the government destroyed an entire region. It wasn't a chemical spill, wasn't an industrial accident, wasn't a natural disaster. It was a choice, a calculated decision to sacrifice part of the country to save the rest. And if you're reading this, if this document has been released, it means we failed. It means the entity is free. Stay away from West Virginia. Stay away from the Greenbrier. Stay away from any area within 100 miles of White Sulphur Springs. Because by the time you read this, those areas will be quarantine zones. And anything organic that was in them, people, animals, plants, will have been assimilated. The entity doesn't kill. It transforms. It converts. It makes you part of itself. And once you're part of it, once your tissue has been converted to its biochemistry, you're still conscious, still aware, still you, in some horrible sense. But you're not in control anymore. You're just one cell in a much larger organism, one node in a network that spans miles, one voice in a chorus that sings songs older than human civilization, the miners who died in 1934, the construction workers who died in 1958, the 2 drilling workers who died in 2009. They're all still there, still part of the entity, still aware after decades of being absorbed. That's the real horror, not death, not destruction, eternal absorption, eternal awareness, eternal existence as part of something inhuman. I monitor the news from West Virginia every day, waiting for the signs, increased seismic activity, unexplained illnesses near the old mining areas, mass evacuations blamed on chemical spills. When those signs appear, I'll know. Containment has failed. The entities are free. And I'll make the final call I've been dreading for 39 years. I'll contact Agent Torres, or whoever's replaced her. I'll give the authorization code for the scorched-earth protocol, and West Virginia will burn. But maybe it won't come to that. Maybe Dr. Cooper's compound will work. Maybe the current team will find a way to kill the entity before it breaches. Maybe we'll get lucky one more time. Or maybe I'm just an old man, hoping for miracles that won't come. All I know for certain is this. There's something under the Greenbrier Hotel that should never have been discovered. Something that was sealed away for good reasons. Something that the government has been fighting to contain for 90 years. And it's winning. So if you ever visit the Greenbrier, if you tour that famous bunker, if you walk those beautiful grounds, remember what's beneath your feet. Remember what's been contained there since before you were born. Remember that luxury and beauty and careful landscaping can hide horrors that should never see daylight. And pray that the containment holds. Because if it doesn't, if those seals finally fail, you won't get a warning. You won't get a chance to evacuate. You'll just wake up one morning to news reports about a chemical disaster in West Virginia. And by the time you understand what's really happening, it'll be too late. The entity will already be spreading. Already reaching towards the surface, already converting everything organic it touches. And the only thing left to do will be burning it all down. That's the truth about the Greenbrier. That's the secret that's been kept for 90 years. And now you know.